Mr. Angus?
Here.
Mrs. Fisher? Here. Mr. Keeper?
Here.
Mrs. Kehoe?
Here.
Mr. Cowell?
Here.
Mrs. Locker?
Here.
Mrs. Mylan?
Here.
Mr. Sass?
Here.
Mrs. Smith?
Here.
All board members are present.
Presentation. David, that's it.
Would somebody like to explain to the audience why we're doing this? And what we're doing?
We're opening sealed bids for some equipment that the district is replacing and no longer usable for us, and that is, for those of you that want a violation of this, we're following the state procedure for a public entity getting rid of equipment that they no longer use. Thank you.
And for four bids on various items, new tractors, truck, and a watch. And one bid here for one of the tractors for $469.50.
replace the turf, it's going to be around $535,000. That's a pretty set fee because it's simply just rip out and replace. It would take approximately 3 weeks to have it done actually before our fall sports would start this season. The last scenario, it would throw into the mix up at the junior high, which is not necessary, but would be a luxury to have, especially for our junior high students and soccer teams, where we wouldn't have to double up on practices and playing times on our field here. We're willing to come in and turf the field at approximately $966,000. That would be the whole thing from testing the surfaces, putting in the cement. At the end of the day, it's a pretty good deal compared to what other schools are offering right now. They are cutting us a little bit of a break because during that time we do have a downtime here. And if we are doing the track, it would kind of be a double case scenario. The company, again, is ELA Sport. Ernie Graham would be the head engineer on the project. He's well known in the area. He does colleges from Pitt, Penn State, to West Virginia. Some schools in the area that have used him, Pine Richland, West Allegheny, Mars, some closer schools to us, Mohawk, Riverside, these are schools that have used him since 2010. Over 40 public schools and their colleges grows nationally as well. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer. The pricing the pricing comes from the state with Keystone Purchasing Network. Essentially, they put out a bid for fields, track and field, and field turf also won the bid, and they also broke the ELA Sport. So the bid process is you are essentially getting the best price at the state level. The bid was already put out by them. So they are very competitive with the market right now.
When you say a sand-based field, is that right now we have a rubber-based field?
It's 100% rubber-based. The sand-based field would be a mixture of some rubber and mostly sand. You'll see a more true bounce, especially in the sport of soccer, and in football you won't have the ball bounce as much.
Because originally when they started putting fields in, they put sand in originally. Those are the first fields out there that
Yes.
they put sand-based in. Everybody moved to rubber, and then the bigger schools moved to rubber that was dyed green, so it would match the field. So why are we going back to, it seems like we're going backwards. Is that because of study on concussion
Yes.
studies?
Yeah, essentially what it came down to is the concussion era, where student athletes have been getting more concussed, and they in turn did a study and found out that these rubber fields actually have a larger, it's not directly from the first bounce, but it's from the second bounce of the head on the turf, where the rubber is creating a trampoline effect, and where the sand almost has a dead stop, true life grass bounce to it.
Brian, I have a question for you on the third bid, third project, 166. Is that simply that does not include the running track? That running track is still a separate item?
The whole job site, you get all three projects complete. The max it would be roughly 2.1, and if you were on the low end, it'd be around 1.9. So in that $2 million range. But to answer your question, yes, that would only be for the turf and not the track. The track would be separate from that.
I have a question for Mr. Sass with this. Where's the money coming from for these athletic improvements?
Right now, the proposition is that the capital projects fund will have about $5.2 million of cash allocated into it. I don't want to confuse why we're borrowing basically equivalent sum. But basically, we're paying, the proposition is to pay for the capital improvements of
So I have a few other questions. I was somewhat surprised because we had talked about the high school track. That certainly is something that does need done, and we talked about it last spring, that this is something that we weren't able to have home track meets on. But and I appreciate, thank you, Mr. Sass, explaining the capital funds, but did you go through a ranking or criteria system? I was caught off guard because there are many capital projects that we could do throughout the district. Why track and field? Why that right now? How about the restrooms and the bathrooms at the junior high? Why not finish off the projects at the junior high since we're doing the HVAC? The bathrooms at the junior high are in really bad shape, and there's some other capital improvement projects we could do there. We also have some technology needs. Our local area networks are out of date. There's other projects within the district that have to do more related to academics. So I just wanted to know, not that this isn't necessary, it certainly is necessary. I love sports, so it's not anything against that. I'm just trying to understand what's the criteria that we're trying to use, and shouldn't anything that's related to academics and student facilities from a population standpoint rise to the top?
Well, let me just make that, those are good points, Terry, and the points that you mentioned on the technology, the staff, Lori Hine, Josh, the principals, Barry, Travis, we're putting in all new labs in all of the schools. We've gotten the money through some of our grants, so that's all in the work. All of our technology has been updated through Tyler Technologies. We're hoping to have new labs and new equipment in the school for the beginning of school. In terms of Constellation, we're working with them in a couple areas, one of which is I have Dave working with them and some other fundamental things that need to be done at the junior high. We're looking at bathroom renovation as well now. We're looking at some painting. We're looking at a variety of different issues to all update that as well.
So I'm just throwing this out to the board. So then should we hold until we can get some estimates from Constellation before we undertake another capital project? Should we hold and make some assessment based upon some criteria? Again, I love sports. I'm not saying this isn't necessary, and I absolutely agree with you. We don't want to do anything to jeopardize safety, but we definitely need to consider all aspects of what needs to be done with the $5.2 billion in capital funds that we have available.
Terry, what do we do next year? Football fails to play football? We just shut the place down?
What happens when we can't wash our hands in the restrooms?
Well, I think that's all that's going to be taken care of.
Renovation, we're seeing that's part of the project. Dave is working with them. We're not seeing that as large capital expense.
But how much will that cost? Do we have those estimates?
Not at this time.
So we don't know if that's 500,000 or 2 million.
Well, we're not looking at those kind of dollars for that, for what we have planned. But we'll be getting back to the board. In other words, we didn't see one as not being able to do the other.
Well, what do you have to, what's your comment?
Obviously, project number 3, turf at the junior high school, was a little bit, it was out there. It was just something that we got numbers for probably. I don't think putting in turf at the junior high school is feasible. It would be nice, but I just don't think it's feasible given our situation right now. The track at the junior high needs to be done. I don't think that a AAA, what are we now in track, quad A? AAA, but all right. So a AAA program not being able to run on their home track, I think, is a little bit of a disgrace. I think that project needs to be done. That track, when was that track put in?
14 years ago.
All right. it has met its longevity, and it is not in very good shape. I don't know if anybody's been up there to see it or walk on it, but it's not in very good shape. Again, for our athletes, first of all, it's a safety concern. Our athletes are up there running on it. We don't want anybody to get hurt, any more liability than we already have to. Plus, I think it's an embarrassment to have to go to a WPIAL scheduling meeting and say we can't have any home meets. We have to go on the road for everything. So with the track, it needs done. The football field here at the high school, it had about a 10-year longevity, right?
Correct.
We're at year 13?
Yes, at year 12, I believe, actually.
Year 12? It still has 2 years in it, maybe?
The last GMAT test they did on it, they said it approximately had a year, if that. But the bounce effect on it was pretty high. So at least minimum a year left. And just one thing to add, they also said they would hold payment until next year if we decided to do it.
Are all the schools field turfs getting tested with this GMAT
Yes.
technology?
Yeah.
Is it going to be required in WPIL to have certain?
I believe the PIAA will most likely mandate it, and that'll probably come from the national level before it even comes to the PIA level.
I think for right now, I think our best thing right now is just to stay with project number 1, go through the track renovations that was needed, and I think Mrs. Mountain is right that we need to focus some of our other monies on the junior high in some aesthetic. The bathrooms definitely, the 2 bathrooms by the auditorium definitely need done. So that would be where I would stand on this.
Looking at these dates, does this mean that there will be no fall sports played at the junior high?
That is correct. We will relocate the junior high soccer teams to a field that will be pretty much adjacent to where that field is right now, but they will still be playing up at the junior high. And then the junior high football team will practice on grass up there, and then they will play their games down here.
Okay, and my other comment is you seem fairly certain that that is our best price that we're gonna get. Will this go out to bid? I know that North Allegheny is right now replacing turf for $372,000 and a track for $400,000. Fox Chapel is doing similar renovations on their tracks. They're doing turf and a track and an additional track of $1.1 million. You seem certain that that's the best price.
What I can do, and I've already started the process, I emailed every athletic director in Louisville that has recently or is going to do a turf or track renovation for their price and what company they're using. More times than not, they are using this field turf company along with ELA because of the Keystone Purchasing Network. However, I mean, we can always go back.
Neither of these places that I'm referring to, ELA.
And we can always go back to ELA and renegotiate as well. This was just their first offer on sheet of paper where we can go back and say, we need this to come down. Because if a company gives you a price the first time, usually that's not going to be the best price that they can give.
I have to say that I sent the board a number. I have to say that
Okay. Josh, they were working earlier.
this one's working now? I am really close, okay. So I had sent the board a link to the pricing that Fox Chapel had, that Mrs. Smith had, sorry, concern is to see where our children are going to be. We need to improve our scores. The track is great, but most of the kids are going to be in the classrooms, not on that track. So my concern is that they will be educated with the technology. I know we had talked about iPads. I would love to see one-to-one iPads so that we can quit purchasing books and maybe purchase more of the software or the downloads for the iPads, and then we would be current. So that's where I stand on that, Mr. Goodwill. Testing.
I'm not opposed to the track issue itself because I think it is a safety concern, and unfortunately, a lot of people other than the students do use that track as a walking track, and as they continue to do it, I think we have a liability. As far as the turf here, it's going to be replaced in the next year or two. I'd like to see some competitive bids on it right now, and even a second bid at least for the track up there. I am opposed to item number 3, which is the turf at the junior high. I have some concerns that there's really not any security up there at the junior high compared to the fencing that we have down here and the lighting, whatever, and I just think it would be subject to a lot of misuse or vandalism after hours. So I'd be happy to see turf put in there, not natural turf, but regular grass if we need to reseed it or whatever the case may be. And the track I have no problem with, and I'd just like to see a second bid.
I would be in favor of item number 1. I do believe we should look at other numbers because whoever brought this Fox Chapel article to us brings, it's a lot lower. Now, we don't have the same specs. We would probably have to compare, so to speak, apples to apples, but perhaps we could get 2 of these completed for a lesser number with a different company. I, at this point, cannot support turf on the junior high field. That is definitely a luxury in my opinion. So I would just like a new bid, perhaps for 1 and 2, so we can fulfill the things we need sooner rather than later. And in addition, I'll just make one comment. As a simple point, not to grandstand, last month, we ended up with a $230,000, give or take, when we approved the budget. And the first thing we were presented as a board was track and field. We had discussed it going towards education, what we were going to do with that money. And the first thing we see is track and field. Yes, it's a necessity. We need to do these things. But I was kind of hoping somebody would have come forward with an idea or a plan or something having to do with education. Under my committee this month, in July, there's nothing listed. This would be the time we're planning for the new school year. I know we're not buying new curriculum, but even an update on the STEAM, we're moving forward with those things. We have a lot of great things going on. I'm just not sure the board is hearing about them.
And I agree with Mrs. Smith. We are in the midst of doing intense planning for the academic program for next year. We've already met. We have with just the building administrators next week at the central office, presenting them with a skeleton of a plan that we're going to call in the central office, building principals, academic coaches, and our plan is then to present to the board what it is we're proposing for the 16-17 academic year in terms of curriculum, materials that will be used, and so forth. So we are in the process of developing. We are going a little slower with that plan and being a little bit more methodical, but I agree that I need to keep the board updated in that area. Thank you.
So perhaps in August, can we hear some type of
Absolutely.
presentation moving forward?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
also would like to echo what Mrs. Smith said, because in my comment earlier was that we did say last month that we are going to take those savings and put it into education, so it would be reflected back to our students and hopefully higher test scores. I definitely think this needs to be put out for additional bids. I think we might be able to get the number down lower. But I also have a comment, and my comment is about 8 years ago, there were some additional items in our, at the time, newer buildings that needed to be corrected, and we still haven't even discussed those. So I'd like those to come back to the table before all the money in the capital projects fund is gone.
Mary Jo, I didn't hear the second part. About 8 years ago, what?
About 8 years ago, in some of our new buildings, there were some issues that had come up, and we actually had an architectural firm come in and give us some bids on what it would cost to fix those particular items. And at that time, because we didn't have the money, they got pushed to the wayside, and I'm sure Mrs. Locker will remember, as she was on the board.
Specifically, that it was the window.
And a lot of it was occurring at Economy Elementary, and I would like to see that revisited before all that money is spent.
Specifically, it was at Economy Elementary, it was the lintels on the windows. It was the canopy, the library wall, the canopy on the front of the facade, and I'm not sure what you want to call it, vestibule doors going into the kindergarten wing. And did you say Mary Jo, did you say the library?
Right, the exterior
The
library
whole
wall,
back wall,
the
yeah.
section where the wings connect into the main building.
The whole back wall, and it's,
And I believe it was the art room that has a big crack in it.
that's the other side of the building. The other side of that wall.
We're in the process of getting bids for the canopy right now.
Yeah, they used screws that were on stainless steel. They used drywall screws. And therefore, they rusted, and there's nail pots, and then hot water's infiltrating behind.
Mr. Sass?
No, I'm comfortable in getting bids for items 1 and 2, only to validate that the state purchasing program is the best cost alternative. I would not choose to support item 3. It seems the focus of the discussion is moving capital projects up until this current budget year, 16-17. The Stanford School District has never had a capital budget. It's never had a capital projects fund. This is the first year that any anticipation of planning for future monies on capital projects was reflected within a budget over the last 12 years. It is anticipated, based on the tax increase that was assumed this year, that we would allocate in future budgets approximately $750,000 each budgetary year into capital projects to allow us to save monies for larger projects over respective periods. Up to this current calendar or fiscal year, this is a week but not heard me, the Amherst School District never had a capital projects budget, nor did it have a capital projects fund to begin to save monies for significant renovations or projects to any facility within the district.
My opinion is number 1 and number 2 would be nice to have. Number 2 would be good. Only reason number 2 I would go for is because we can not have to pay for that for a year. They would fund that for us. We wouldn't have to pay for it for a year. And our students would be safe out there in the football field. Our track program up there, the track is pretty bad. People have to realize that we're getting a track done for $480,000. That's an 8-lane track. Schools around here don't have 8 lanes, they have 6. So you're looking at probably $150,000 difference right there right off the bat, just because you put in 2 more lanes. The state funded people to come up with this project, they're giving us a good price, but if you want to go out and rebid it, that is fine, I don't have a problem with that. It's just the only problem is going to come in the fact that you're not going to probably be able to get the track done this year because it'll be too late in the year to get it taken care of.
Thank you.
Mr. Keever, since you have buildings and grounds, do you have a list of projects that you would like to see done? And would you like to try to put out some bids and try to get these projects done? Because school starts in September, and this is already July. So if you have anything you want to get done or get accomplished, I would suggest that you put together a plan of what you want to get done. Bring it to the board so we can discuss it and see what needs done and what doesn't need done. This has to be done by next meeting because we need to send bids out and needs to get in the newspaper. This brings us to public comment. Meeting discussed, meetings are open to the public. This time anyone from the audience may come forward to comment or ask questions. Each person will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. You can only speak once during the half-hour period. There will be no discussion during this time. If any board member or administrator desire to address questions or concerns may do so at the conclusion of the committee reports. Go ahead, sir.
Leo Giansanti, Economy Borough. Item number 9 on the agenda this evening addresses tax collectors' bond coverage. And the recommendation is that you increase the amount of bond coverage for the tax collectors to reflect the amount of school revenues that they do collect for the school district. So I'm assuming that this must be related to the recent fiasco with the lack of taxes brought in one particular area. And begs the question, was that tax collector adequately bonded? And in your discussion this evening with number 9, perhaps you will address that, and maybe you will indicate as to whether or not the district is going to receive any of those revenues, or are we totally at a loss of what was not collected? Secondly, it would be interesting to know whether there is ongoing communication between your business office and the tax collectors with respect to things like whether or not those revenues are submitted back to the district on a timely basis. How long do tax collectors hold revenues before they deposit them or before they remit them to the school district? So with respect to the promptness of that. And in addition, you would get a monthly financial report that would indicate the amount of revenue coming in, whether it's revenue from the state or revenue from your tax collectors. Was there not a flag that went up that signaled to you that certain amounts of tax revenues were not coming in on a timely basis, whether or not the business office attended to that detail? So perhaps in your discussion of item number 9 this evening, you might discuss for the public to inform us a little bit more about some of those items. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else now that needs to step forward?
Mike Stulak, Cotton Borough. I noticed at the end of the agenda, there's no time to speak about past and future business. There's no category in there, so it only relates to what's in the agenda right now, which is a change that would happen if that's the case. So I don't know if that's just something that was left out, or what is the case? We'll be able to talk or not talk?
Yeah, we do have that discussion at the end of the voting meeting.
Okay.
Not at the end of the meeting discuss meeting.
Okay, that's good. Then I'll bring up my comment at that point in time, because what I want to say is not on the agenda.
Thank you.
Marilyn Sullivan, Economy Borough. I just, with respect to the presentations we just heard, I was wondering if you had a policy for bidding on the board. Do you have a board policy having a certain amount of bids before you make a decision on a capital project or any project that's over a certain amount of money. Do you have that?
That requires state law.
Pardon?
State law governs our policies, so we usually adopt what they recommend to us.
And what do they recommend? Do you have to have a certain amount of bids? Because it sounded like you were almost ready to take the first bid.
Well,
from that last
you
presentation.
have to understand that that was under CoStars, which is the state bidding system. They do the legwork for districts. They've already received multiple bids for those services. So basically, that is, legally, that is the lowest bid, and we can accept it, correct?
Well, right, so the way it works is, in shorthand, anything that costs less than $19,800 can, depending on what it is, you get quotes instead of bids. Anything that's more than that, you have to, and there are a lot of caveats, so this is just in general, but you have to get, you have to solicit bids, unless the entity that you're seeking the contract with is from an approved bidder list, like the CoStars program, which is where Field Turf and the LAS were selected from. There's actually quite a few programs, not just CoStars, but there are approved bidder lists where essentially, as Brian and everyone else has described, the state essentially acts as someone soliciting bids and says, this is what you can do in the field for in Pennsylvania, and any school district that wants to select a project from those approved bidders for those prices essentially can do that without going through the individual bid process. That makes sense.
Mark Korinsky, Economy Borough. First of all, we really appreciate the discussion, particularly as the replacement of the track and so forth. I think this is very healthy to hear everybody's opinion, and I believe Casey, don't know her last name, last month brought that up, that it is a healthier way to conduct business and to meet and discuss. But in the past 4 or 5 years, what we've noticed, what I've noticed in the board, is very reactive type measures. In other words, here comes a track and field, and boom, we're going to talk about that. Mr. Kowal asked Mr. Kieber, you've got to go out now and get bids in the next 2 weeks, next week, and bring them to us. Mrs. Milan has brought up on numerous occasions that this district needs a strategic plan. It's well and good that we have $4 some million in the capital budget. That's terrific, and we need to keep funding that because things do happen. But unless you have a plan, you're going to continue to find yourselves in the same boat you are tonight. And that is asking questions. Well, don't we have other priorities? Or don't we have this? That's very, very difficult for you to decide on what your priorities are for expenditures. And so what happens is you are reactionary and never proactive on looking at how your money is spent. And somebody had mentioned, well, we need to spend this before money's gone. Well, if you have a strategic plan, that's never a concern because you're all in agreement on where you're going, what you're going to do, and anticipate your needs. And until you get there, you're going to find yourself creating the same situation over and over again that we've witnessed for a number of years. I think we finally have a board sitting here that has the ability now to take that upon themselves and make sure that happens.
Thank you.
Sean Fisher of Harmony Township. I was the construction manager on the Fox Chapel High School project, and their track and turf project was outside of our scope of work that we were managing. But I do know that they put it out to public bid, they advertised the bid, they had a bid day, and they're doing the high school track. We're not doing it. Their field's comparable to ours size-wise, and they're doing the middle school track, and that was all 1.1 million. And they're doing that now. So I would suggest putting it out to bid, getting multiple.
Thank you. Is there anybody else at this time who cares to comment? Okay, let's move along then. Let's move into the committee reports. Mrs. Smith, Education and Technology. Vice President. I have nothing to discuss this evening. Would you like to direct the administration for some sort of report for next week possibly? Well, I'm not sure if we'll be ready for next week, but I keep hearing everyone talk about the one-to-ones and the iPads, and I'm not 100% sold that is really best for our district or that the kids actually would benefit the most from that. Number one thing, and this is because I see my own children struggling with computers and some of our technologies, at least at the elementary level thus far. Do I have to say it all over? Yeah. Okay. With the computer systems in place, some of the concerns we have voiced this evening, and the things that we're getting grants on, is that correct? I would like a little bit of a presentation about what it is we are trying to achieve. Like, do we want to replace all of the PCs in the elementaries or at the junior high or all of the above for the district? Or I know the Wi-Fi and the LAN systems or whatever they're called, specifically in Economy Elementary, are slower than Moses. It took over a half an hour to get a PowerPoint presentation up and running. That was last spring. So I'm not sure if any of those improvements have been made. That's a concern to me. So if we can look forward to how we're going to help immediately, perhaps with this grant or monies that we already have allocated in our technology budget for the coming school year, that would be something of interest to me. Would anyone care to add to that?
I think what would be helpful for me, again, is if we could have, really for each one of these committee reports from the administration, the top 3 areas of focus. Even if we don't have a strategy right now, if we can have the top 3 areas of focus, and then each month we can follow along and check that with budget, check that with progress reports, and if it's measurable with metrics, we can also do that. I think that would be very helpful. That way we know we're moving in a specific direction.
And one last thing I'd like to add, I am pleased with the administration getting together and having kind of like a round robin discussion, and now they have given us, and we're starting to see their wish lists. I think that's important because those are the folks working hard every single day. We are not. They are with the students, they are in the buildings, they are keeping everything running. So with their wish lists, hopefully now we can grant what we can based on needs and priorities. And this is my opinion, that's not a bad idea. At least that would be somewhere to start. Thanks, that's all.
Thank you. Mr. Sass, finance and budget, please.
There are several recurring items on the finance budget, including the renewal of several contracts for special services, alternative education, BBIU special ed programs, etc. There are 3 specific items I wish to address. One is we will have to consider the library contributions. Evidently, the school district has historically provided budgetary stipends to both Baden and Amherst Memorial Library. deposits from one tax year and applying them to the predecessor tax year. So basically, the amount of monies that were owed to the school district increased gradually over a period of time that I understand was 5 or 6 tax years. Ultimately, the amount of the receivable got so large that the business office of the school district began to inquire as to why such substantial funds had not been remitted to the district, which resulted in ultimately a discovery process and law enforcement coming into place. There is, because of the lack of bond or significant bond, there is minimal estimates of recovery of those monies. Those monies were written off as part of the predecessor. Last year's budget, we actually authorized, you are unable to write off taxes at the taxing authority in the state of Pennsylvania unless they're exonerated, which means you go through a process of selling a delinquent property to entice somebody to buy it without having to pay the old delinquent taxes, because the taxes are worth more than the property. The school district chose to write off what it believed were the impact of this, what's commonly referred to as a kiting scheme. In the last fiscal year, that it had substantial economic impact to the school district over 4 or 5 fiscal periods, and was a significant reason probably for some of the operating deficits during all of those operating years. I know the solicitor could probably talk to you about the legal aspects of it, but to what is supposed to occur, there are 4 different local tax collectors to which the Ambridge School District signs contracts with. They are charged by law with being able to collect local taxes. Unfortunately, under PA law, those local taxes, even though they're in the school district, are written in the name of the individual tax collector. So Stacy Kroll in Ambridge, as an example, are not written to the school district. So obviously, it allows for a great deal of indiscretion. Unfortunately, it is state law that we must use elected local tax collectors and enter into agreements with tax collection. They also, in many cases, will collect that nuisance tax, the $15. You're alive, pay $15. $10 goes to the school, $5 goes to the borough. They also have contracts to pay for that, and actually, it's one of the items that we will have to bring up. The cost of the collection of those taxes almost equals the payments received on behalf of the school district at this point in time. When you're only collecting $10, you got to prepare them and mail them, and then collect the $10 each. It's almost ludicrous. So I defer to the solicitor in terms of the legalities of it. But the only attributable answer I have, other than the frustration of losing that kind of money, was continual change in administration. There were 3 business managers in a 5-year period and 4 superintendents in a 6-year period. So I'm going to assume that nobody actually had enough footing in their position to understand the ramifications of something as an annual bond, which is to be attached to the tax collection contracts regionally for local collectors. I'm sorry. Also, there will be some discussion of a safe school grant. The safe school grant relates to a resource officer in Thailand. The board authorized putting in a resource officer, a policeman, local from Harmony Township, to spend a few hours every other day or something in Harmony. That has seemed to pay benefits in terms of respect for law enforcement and the discipline within that small elementary school. There is a submission to allow for that position to be full-time in 16-17 school year. Whether it's successful or not, we do not yet know, but at least we're trying. There is also some discussion of Harmony Township sponsoring, or the Harmony Township Police sponsoring a couple months of that resource officer pending the grant application period. But the caveat is if the school district did not get the grant, the school district would be responsible for the remaining 8 or 10 months of that resource officer contract if the grant wasn't successful. That's all I have, Mr. President. I defer to the solicitor on paying tax collector.
Jim did a pretty good job explaining it. Essentially, these types of schemes are very difficult to identify. These types of schemes are very difficult to identify until the music stops. It's just like that. What they do is they take the money they're getting now and pay what they said they were going to pay you, 6 months ago. And there came a point where the business office here discovered that what they expected to get didn't match up with what they were actually getting by an enormous amount of money. And at that point, the scheme was starting to unravel. We contacted the police, and ultimately, on paper, the U.S. attorneys were able to prosecute the case. We'll never know exactly how much money was stolen because a significant number of tax bills were paid cash. And there was no record kept of those cash payments. We believe, and he admitted to, beginning this scheme 5 or 6 years ago. We think sometime around July, it was 2010. And as to the sufficiency of the bond, it's sufficient. And that's why I recommend that he approved. It's not uncommon to have relatively small amounts of money as insurance in these cases, but what we have is not going to cover any significant portion of what we lost. There's no realistic path to recovering that money because they have no assets. The district can sue them for years, and we win at every stage, and we're not making the difference because there's nothing to win. We call that being judgment proof, in my line of work. And it doesn't matter, we get the judgment. The judge would say, absolutely, you owe Amherst School District $1.3 million. They'd say, okay, great, I have no money to pay it. Nothing would happen. It's incredibly frustrating, but there's really no way to prove what the present situation is except to put ourselves in a better situation to protect this, keep us from happening in the future. That's what we're trying to do.
Thank you. Let's move along to buildings and grounds. Mr. Keeper?
Item number 1 is the LA Sports. We already discussed this. Is there any other discussion on the potential renovations of either the turf or the track? Okay, number 2, modified location agreement. It is recommended the modified location agreement between the Emory School District and FNT Enterprises LLC to film football games for the Little Bridgers on school property be approved at no cost to the district with the final location agreement terms being negotiated by all the parties as presented. Any discussion?
Just a comment to be sure that we're clear on this. So I'm saying that items 1, 2, and 3 will come off for projects. Item DLA's sport, 1, 2, and 3 will off until we get second bids. That's for 1 and 2, number 3 will come off.
Correct. I think that was a consensus.
So you may not
of the
see
board.
this, you may not see this next week.
Correct. That was right on number 1.
What I interject related to the bond has to have a bona fide underlying estimated cost. You cannot borrow money on a bond without an intended purpose. You can't borrow money is basically just to hold the money. So that bond amount needs to be finalized at the next meeting. Whether that is intent, it really is a matter of intent. So let me make just a presumption as an example. We have approved it. We have $4 million for the HVAC system, and we approved the track, even though we may have a range of costs between $400,000 and $600,000. It is a reasonable cost estimate to support borrowing monies off the bond. So now you're at whatever, $4.6 million. If indeed we wish to go forward with the high school field also this year, we have to basically make that same decision as to a commitment. It does not preclude from getting competitive bids and ultimately paying the lowest bona fide bid at the best price. But we as a board must authorize the project to proceed to be able to secure bond monies against that project. Otherwise, we will forego that borrowing, and next year we will not be able to avail ourselves of monies outside the resources
Was there any discussion about the modified location agreement with the Little Bridgers? Okay, item number 3, I actually think should be under finance and budget with the Barkheimer Incorporated. It is recommended to approve the district business manager and the superintendent as a liaison between the Amber Dairy School District and Barkheimer Incorporated for sharing confidential tax information with the district for official purposes. Does that sound like that should be under finance and budget?
Well, yes, we will move it there.
Since we brought it up here, is there any discussion on that? Number 4, Economy Elementary Playground. It's recommended to approve Jeffrey Associates to make additional repairs to the Economy Elementary Playground for a cost of $2,645 as presented. To my knowledge, there was some additional damage that they found up there that needs fixed. Was that in addition to the original, after they found damage and then there was more damage after that?
The original work has not been done. More damage was found.
Yeah, there was more damage done. This is all prior to me, but the first item is board approved. This came in after it. It wasn't presented to the contractor yet, so we got them back involved, and it is a safety issue up there. Now, we would need to really shut that playground down for safety reasons if this doesn't get done.
Any other comments? Number 5, cabling and trimming trees at the junior high school. It is recommended that Tracy Fellman Company be approved to cable and trim trees at the junior high school at a cost of $3,040 as presented. To my knowledge, these are the trees that are in the courtyard.
Yes.
If anybody doesn't know, the junior high has a courtyard. There are trees, substantially pretty big trees in the courtyard. They're splitting right now.
The biggest one is splitting right now. When I did a walk through the property, we noticed the split carrying up pretty high up on the trunk. We did have it looked at by a professional. He said the tree is healthy. He can cable it and thin it out and trim out the overhang. It is a significant amount over the property, the building, and then trim and thin out the other 2 trees in that courtyard for this amount. To remove just the big tree would be over $5,000 by itself, nothing done to the other 2 trees.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keeber. We're looking at athletics, public relations, steering and roles, and legislative committee, in which we have no information at this point. Can you please read?
I did email the solicitor today. There was something that, I did email the solicitor today. There was something that came out requesting an electronic signature from the school districts to their legislators to all the expansion of charter schools. So maybe we can do that as a board.
So maybe we can put that, did you want that to be on the agenda for next week, Mary Jo? Okay, very well. Renee, could you read the sunshine law, please?
Yes. Sunshine Law, Section 708 of the Sunshine Law permits agencies to hold executive sessions to discuss employment and personnel matters, labor relations and arbitration matters, purchase or lease of real estate up to the time an option or agreement is obtained, litigation or potential litigation, and other agency business which if discussed in public will violate lawful privilege or would violate confidentiality laws. The Board of School Directors will now adjourn to executive session to discuss 1, employment and personnel matters, 2, salary schedule and labor relations.
Thank you. This board will not be returning. Before we adjourn, does anybody else on the board have any comments, any questions? Mr. Sulek, what can I help you with?
I'm not sure if I'm the only one who's going to speak, but I do owe an apology to the board. At the last meeting discussed, I used the term someone getting their hands in a cookie jar relating to the transportation bill. that was a bad metaphor. I think what ends up happening, when I thought about it as we went through the meeting, was that the contract itself seemed to be wanting to push through before all of the members of the board had an opportunity to look at the contract. As during the conversation with many people coming up, asking questions of the board, have you seen the contract, have you seen the contract? Nobody had seen the contract. At least that's my recollection of the meeting. So I was fine, and I do want to apologize for that. But secondly, what I do want to say is, as I was leaving the meeting, I was addressed by one of the board members who basically said, in a very loud, boisterous tone, that he had the contract, he read the contract, and that there's a 1.5 million difference between the two companies. That's why we're going to vote for that. So someone had it, someone didn't admit to having it, someone lied about not having it, and someone had to make a decision what they want to do with it. Now, I have no problem if you, what decisions you make, that's what your job is. But if someone is hiding something during that conversation, that is not right. You should not lie about having something or not having something. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.